This is Robert of MayflowerBookshop.com, and today we're into Patanjali's Yoga Aphorisms. The first book of yoga is not about postures and asanas, although it's about perhaps the asana of the mind, the concentration and absorption, the focus, concentration, and the meditative absorption. It's kind of like focusing on one thing and then melting into nothing. Very similar. But today we're going to talk about book 2. And it's very interesting that the first book on yoga, Patanjali's Yoga Aphorisms, it's very interesting that the first rule is kind of show up, be here now. It's like coming into empowerment by now, being here now, listen now. And let me see if I can find it here. Assuredly, the exposition of yoga or concentration is now to be made. And then the second rule, which is really kind of the first one, concentration, or, focus, one-pointedness, at one-ment. Concentration or yoga is the hindering of the modifications of the thinking principle, the ceasing of the modifications of the mind, that one stops thinking and deepens one's thinking into the wholeness of oneself, or the point at center. Either you're the auric egg, point at center, and the conversation between. The third rule is at the time of concentration, the soul abides in the state of a spectator without a spectacle. At other times than that of concentration, the soul is in the same form as the modification of the mind. And it goes into kind of like diagnosing what are these modifications and how does one get that once removed vantage point. But I want to jump to book 2 today. And we'll visit the other books at another time. Very interestingly enough, we have by the way, the Patanjali's Yoga Aphorisms, like the William Q. Judge translation of the Bhagavad Gita. This is an excellent Judge translation. And he just nails it. So what can we do? I'd like to go into part 2 with you and converse about it. What I'm doing in this series of talks is trying to deepen the beginner's mind, you might say. So here we are in book 2, means of concentration. So we begin by ceasing the modifications of the mind, by not thinking, but we're still aware. The practical part of concentration is mortification, muttering, and resignation to the Supreme Soul. Mortification is that we kind of die now to, today's a good day to die, the Native American Indian, or you should die daily, the injunction by St. Paul, I believe. To be born again, we have to I think basically we're all most people are hypnotized or asleep or unconscious or on automatic or numbed out or something. And so to get this focus of concentrating our higher spiritual self through this magnifying glass to start a spiritual fire of higher love within our own heart and soul and spirit, we have to kind of somehow figure out how to either concentrate or mortify. And then this muttering and resignation to the Supreme Soul is very much like when you fall in love. I was thinking, I read this earlier and I thought, muttering is like, when you, I love you, I think that's kind of like what we have to do is we have to kind of fall in love with some deeper part of ourselves that we don't see when we rush through our day, and some deeper part of the other person that we don't see when we rush through our day. And the resignation is to resign from the externals for a minute of automatic, and to pour ourselves back in and to reflect, to have our inner self reflect what's going on in the world, or to stop moving in the outer world and have the outer world reflect what's going on with our inner self. Does that make sense? And this idea of emptying oneself, whether through fasting or aesthetic practice, this muttering is a semi-audible repetition of formula laid down by none other than your higher self, or what they call the supreme being, that one has to kind of learn to look for a principal substance of the universe that is like we have a higher self, and the universe has a higher self. The earth has a higher self. The sun has a spiritual self like we do. And this resigning or re-signing ourselves up for exploring, like God in the universe, deity in the universe. And if there's not a God or a higher self, we'll create one. This consigning to the divine or the supreme soul, this offering up without interest in results. That's very much like the Bhagavad Gita. There's a certain kind of immediate result you can get by taking a really hard, good look, taking a really good, empty, open look at the whole of yourself and the whole of what's going on in the world, and idealizing the greatest thing we could possibly do to make the world a better place, or ourselves and our friends awaken with more quality and value, content, creativity, relationship. This offering up on one hand. Just we take the best look we can and idealize, and we concentrate on the virtue and the highest ideal, and then we offer it up to the highest. Or should we experiment with the other way of sinking it into our quietude and waiting and listening in silence for something to do, the right job. Okay, Book 2, Means of Concentration, Part 2. This practical part of concentration is the purpose of establishing meditation and eliminating afflictions. And I'll just continue reading Patanjali's Yoga Aphorisms by Patanjali. Patanjali, Book 2, Means of Concentration. Third point, and on into the other points. The afflictions which arise in the disciple or student are ignorance, egotism, desire, aversion, and a tenacious wish for existence upon the earth. So they're calling afflictions ignorance of the true nature of the self or another or the situation. Egotism, a separate self that's not united with the inner spirit of the other. Desire. Desire itself is a sign that you're separate, but it's chasing something outside of yourself, versus the next one is aversion, which is sympathy. Antipathy is a more subtle way of saying this, desire and aversion. And this tenacious wish for existence upon the earth, which is the clinging. And we know from Star Trek that the Klingons are the bad guys. So the clinging. We should be cling-free. Ignorance is the field of origin of the others named, and whether they be dormant, extenuated, intercepted, or simple. In Tibetan Buddhism, there's ignorance and delusion. Ignorance is the ignorance of the self. The true nature of the self is that no separate self. We're dependent on millions of little things coming together for a temporal sense of permanency. And delusion is ignorance of the nature of the other self. So ignorance is the field of origin of the others named, of egotism and desire and aversion and tenacious wish, clinging. Ignorance is the notion that the non-eternal the impure, the evil is the word live backwards, so it's kind of like going backwards over things again and again, evil, or rather than evolve. Evil is acting out of separateness and ignorance. And that which is not soul are severally, ignorance is a notion that the non-eternal and impure, the evil, and that which is not soul are severally. We're trying to get to the eternal, the pure, good, and what is soul. Egotism is the identifying of the power that sees with the power of seeing. It is the confounding of the soul which really sees with the tool it uses to enable it to see, the mind, or, to a still greater degree of error, with those organs of sense which are in turn the tools of the mind, as for instance when an uncultured person thinks that it is his eye which sees, when in fact it is his mind that uses the eye as a tool for seeing. I'm reading. Desire is the dwelling upon pleasure. Aversion is the dwelling upon pain. The tenacious wish for existence upon the earth is inherent in all sentient beings and continues through all incarnations because it has self-reproductive power. It is felt as well by the wise as the unwise. The foregoing 5 afflictions, when subtle, are to be evaded by the production of the antagonistic mental state. When these afflictions modify the mind by pressing themselves upon the attention, they are to be got rid of by meditation. We just got to figure out what meditation is, right? Okay, let's keep going. Such afflictions are the root of and produce results in both physical and mental actions or works, and they, being our merits or demerits, have their fruitage either in the visible state of that which is unseen. While that root of merit and demerit exists, there is a fructification during each succeeding life upon earth in rank, years, pleasure, or pain. Yeah, it's cause and effect in karma, right? Happiness or suffering results as the fruit of merit and demerit, accordingly as the cause is virtue or vice. But to that man who has attained to the perfection of spiritual cultivation, all mundane things are like vexations, since the modifications of the mind due to the natural qualities are adverse to the attainment of the highest condition. Because until that is reached, the occupation of any form of body is a hindrance, and anxiety and impressions of various kinds ceaselessly continue. Yeah, I think at some point you have to transcend the duality and the opposites, but you have to hold the tension of opposites first to find either their marriage or a way to go deeper, to find a light, or transcend and reconcile these opposites with a new. Emerson said that the true poet or artist is like a lightning rod that dives deep into the very bowels of the earth and reaches to the highest point of sky. And the implication is connects those two with the lightning bolt of realization. I'm probably adding a lot to what Emerson said, okay? Okay, back to the Yoga Aphorisms of Patanjali. That which is to be shunned by the disciple is pain not yet come. Now that's a good one. That which is to be shunned by the student or disciple is pain not yet come. The past cannot be changed or amended. That which belongs to the experiences of the present cannot and should not be shunned. But alike to be shunned are disturbing anticipations or fears of the future, and every act or impulse that may cause present or future pain to ourselves or others. I mean, wherever there's fear, there's a lack of love, right? I'm just commenting here. We should live in the present. If we honor the present with our full presence and our distilled experience and wisdom, the future will be sure. And the fact that we love or want to love is a good start. Okay, let's keep reading. From the fact that the soul is conjoined in the body with the organ of thought, and thus with the whole of nature, lack of discrimination follows, producing misconceptions of duties and responsibilities. This misconception leads to wrongful acts which will inevitably bring about pain in the future. The fact that the soul is conjoined in the body with the organ of thought. Yeah, I think that thought has to be kind of free. Steiner talks about sense-free thinking. I think that the thought can permeate whatever the object is or the moment. Okay, I'm just speculating. So let's keep reading. The universe, including the visible and the invisible, the essential nature of which is compounded of purity, action, and rest. Purity, action, and rest, and which consists of the elements and the organs of action, exists for the sake of the soul's experience and emancipation, freedom. The divisions of the qualities are the diverse and non-diverse, those which may be resolved once but no farther, and the irresolvable. The diverse are such as the gross elements and the organs of sense, the non-diverse, the subtle elements and the mind, the once resolvable, the intellect, which can be resolved into undifferentiated matter, but no farther, and the irresolvable in discrete matter. I'm reading. The soul is the perceiver, is assuredly vision itself pure and simple. The soul is the perceiver, unmodified, and looks directly upon ideas. For the sake of the soul alone, the universe exists. That's deep. For the sake of the soul alone. We have spirit, soul, body, and a simple way of looking at it. The spirit makes us at one with everything, and we understand the stillness of everything. This is me talking, not the... Spirit makes us at one, and our body and matter makes us separate from things. So the unity and diversity of the $1 bill, e pluribus unum, unity and diversity, this is a philosophical thing. This is a state of consciousness, a higher consciousness. And the soul is the mind that can handle it. For the sake of the soul alone, the universe exists. We could also say for the sake of the soul, all one, alone, all one. Plato's The Flight of the Alone to the Alone is the all oneness of us to the all oneness of the universe and back again. Nature in energizing does not do so with a view of any purpose of her own, but with the design, as it were, expressed in the words, "Let me bring about the soul's experience." I'm reading. Although the universe in its objective state has ceased to be, in respect to that man who has attained to the perfection of spiritual cultivation, it has not ceased in respect to all others, because it is common to others besides him. The conjuncture of the soul with the organ of thought, and thus with nature, is the cause of its apprehension of the actual condition of the nature of the universe and the soul itself. Did you get that? The conjuncture, the soul with the organ of thought, and thus with nature. That, thoughts are things. I guess the soul gets identified with these things in nature, and and we fall into this condition of the soul. I mean, a lot of spiritual teachers think that initiation or enlightenment is somehow seeing through the mind, soul being attached to fear and desire and emotions and form, and that things that go round and round and never have a sense of eternity or lasting happiness. And that when the mind can identify with universal thinking, universal compassion, love, universal truth, that there's a resurrection or raising of the soul from the dead form. This is why, like, a lot of artists are unfinished. Until the whole world's enlightened or redeemed, we're all artists on an experimental journey of what it means to be human. Okay, let's keep reading. The cause of this conjuncture of the soul with the organ of thinking, and thus with nature, hooked into the condition and nature of the universe and the soul itself. The cause of this conjuncture is what is to be quitted, and that cause is ignorance. The quitting consists in the ceasing of the conjuncture upon which ignorance disappears, and this is the isolation of the soul. I think when we stop doing negative habits and we turn everything off, the TV and electronics, and we're trying to sit still, we're sitting up straight, and we're listening to the stillness of our heart, listening to the stillness of our deeper soul. And this isolation is really an ISIS. Wisdom starts to arise. It's isolation. It's ISIS, I think, and the elation that comes. I soul. The soul of the I elated. I'm playing with words. That which is meant in this and in the preceding two aphorisms is that the conjuncture of soul and body through repeated reincarnations is due to its absence of discriminative knowledge of the nature of the soul and its environment. And when the discriminative knowledge has been attained, the conjuncture, which was due to the absence of discrimination, ceases of its own accord. This has a lot to do with like the fall of the angels from heaven, but it's really not a fall, it's a descent of our angelic higher self, which was in inertia and eternal being, to be separate so that out of freedom we can choose to reunite and become at one with all life, love and truth. Reading again. The means of quitting the state of bondage to matter is perfect discriminative knowledge continuously maintained. The import of this, among other things, is that the human who has attained to the perfection of spiritual cultivation maintains his consciousness alike while in the body, at the moment of quitting it, and when he has passed into higher spheres, and likewise, when returning, continues it unbroken while quitting higher spheres, spheres, when re-entering his body, and in resuming action on the material plane. Yes, this perfection, this mind stream continuum is what I call it, when a sense of at one minute, like the thread that goes through the mala or the rosary, right? Continuing to read, this perfect discriminative knowledge possessed by the man who has attained to the perfection of spiritual cultivation is of 7 kinds up to the limit of meditation. Some people think you can't cultivate spirituality, but I think most of us have to. And what we're cultivating is we're kind of structuring things and thinking about things so that it leads us up to a silent contemplation, concentration, revelation, rather than an apocalypse of our life. We have revelations and insights, how to go on. Continuing. Until this perfect discriminative knowledge is attained, there results from those practices which are conducive to concentration an illumination more or less brilliant, which is effective for the removal of impurities. The practices which are conducive to concentration are 8 in number: forbearance, religious observances, spiritual observances, postures, suppression of the breath, restraint, attention, contemplation, and meditation. Forbearance is like, I think, to me, is moving into the future with a glimpse of our spiritual eternal self. Spiritual observances are meditate every day, try to eat good, get good sleep. You know, there's kind of like rhythms that we create, which I've talked about in other talks too. The postures are sit up straight. The posture is really the mind sitting up straight and having the mind be in stillness and be part of the movement of life and allowing free thought to arise, is what I'm saying. And suppression of the breath I'm not sure if it's suppression or just every once in a while you let go of all your breath and you take a deep breath in, wishing for enlightenment, taking a look at your stillness within the deeps of your heart, wishing for enlightenment on the in-breath, looking at stillness and blessing the world. Wishing I had enlightenment. I wish I had enlightenment so I could bless all those who suffer. And restraint is to curb our mind and our feelings from just going on without us. That first of all, we have to always check in with the stillness. Attention is just stay aware of the stillness and the movement, and that you're in between and both those. Contemplate that, meditate on that. Okay, let's read. Forbearance consists in not killing, veracity, not stealing, continence, and not coveting. These, without respect to rank, place, time, or compact, are the universal great duties. Religious, spiritual observances are purification of both mind and body. Again, I want to just add that the purification of the mind is emptiness. The purification of the body is healthiness. Purification of both the mind and body, contentment, austerity, inaudible mutterings. Om mani padme hum, Om mani padme hum, Om, 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 like the mantra. I think we talked about that in another talk, but I'll do more of those talks on the mantra. But they're quite inaudible mutterings, like you're talking to God or Jesus or Buddha or Hermes or your deepest, purest, holy, higher self or your greatest love. And persevering devotion to Supreme Soul. It's kind of like when you fall in love, you're like totally devoted. We need to find truth and higher love and universal love, and we need to find things that we can be devoted to. Number 33, in order to exclude from the mind questionable things, the mental calling up of those things that are opposite is efficacious for their removal. Like, in other words, you replace negativity with positivity and non-virtue with a virtue, a bad habit with a good habit. Questionable things, whether done, caused to be done, or approved of, whether resulting from covetousness, anger, or delusion, whether slight or of intermediate character or beyond measure, are productive of very many fruits in the shape of pain and ignorance. Hence, the calling up of those things that are opposite is in every way advisable, like patience for impatience, patience for anger. Continuing, when harmlessness and kindness are fully developed in the yogi, he or she who has attained to cultivating enlightenment of the soul, there is a complete absence of enmity, both in men and women and animals, among all that are near. When veracity is complete, when truth, is that veracity? Bravery of truth? Courage of truth? When veracity is like St. Michael, When veracity is complete, the yogi becomes the focus for the karma resulting from all works, good or bad. You become the focus to transmute karma. That's what's going on. They're talking about. The abstinence from theft in mind and act is complete in the yogi. He has the power to obtain all material wealth. Now, they're saying in this book that when you have the absence, when you don't steal, like like you cop a thought, cop an attitude. When you don't steal either in your mind or in act. I think where there's no stealing is in the radical stillness within yourself, the emptiness practice. And I think the stealing away from the spirit is any form that we get attached to and we cling to, the Klingons. It's an interesting idea that is worthy of meditating. The power to obtain all material wealth is in the abstinence from theft in mind and act, and is complete in the yogi. He has the power to obtain all material wealth. When continence is complete, in other words, continence isn't just sex, it's like when your thoughts just go off by themselves and your feelings, and you're just watching things move, but you're not stopping it, and you're not having an original anything come from within you. So that's continence is, sit down and shut up and listen. The stillness of your thinking and the stillness of your heart, listen to the stillness within. When continence is complete, there is a gain of strength in body and mind. It is not meant here that a student practicing continence solely and neglecting the other practices enjoined will gain strength. All parts of the systems must be pursued concurrently on the mental, moral, and physical planes. It's starting to rain. That's a really good omen to let this stuff sink in. When covetousness is eliminated, there comes to the yogi a knowledge of everything relating to or that which has taken place in former states of consciousness. You can see your past lives, right? When covetousness, when we don't compare ourselves and we don't desire things and wish we had this or that, whenever we can just be rather than become. When covetousness is eliminated, there comes to the yogi a knowledge of everything relating to or that which has taken place in former states of existence. Covetousness here applies not only to coveting any object, but also to the desire for enjoyable conditions of mundane existence, or even mundane existence itself. They're not necessarily talking about not having fun, they're talking about not desiring and coveting and clinging and getting attached to form. You can love 1,000 times more, but you can't be attached to the form that it takes, I'm saying. Okay, let's read. From purification of the mind and body, there arises in the yogi a thorough discernment of the cause and nature of the body, whereupon he loses that regard which others have for the bodily form, and he also ceases to feel the desire of or necessity for association with his fellow beings that is common among other men and women. From purification of the mind and body also ensue to the yogi a complete predominance of the quality of goodness, complacency, intentness, subjugation of the senses, and fitness for contemplation and comprehension of the soul as distinct from nature. From contentment, a spiritual soul, right? It's a soul that's part of spirit rather than nature. Nature, we birth out of nature. It's an outer. I'm adding this, so I should keep reading. From contentment in its perfection, the yogi acquires superlative felicity. How many of you have been asking for superlative felicity lately? Happiness, felicity, it's a nice word, felicity. It's like a subtle-etheric inner contentment and happiness. When austerity is thoroughly practiced by the yogi, the result thereof is a perfecting and heightening of the bodily senses by the removal of removal of impurity. Austerity results in the perfecting and heightening of the bodily senses by the removal of impurity. Through inaudible mutterings, there is a meeting with one's favorite deity. See, I knew that muttering thing was related to the higher self and the beloved. Krishna, Christos, Christ, Hermes, Mithras, Athena, Artemis, Sophia, Isis, right? The higher divine wisdom and truth. Through inaudible mutterings, there is a meeting with one's favorite deity. Originally, there wasn't the word God, there was deity, that you come forth by day, and that we share in the universal Christos, the universal mind. And we're sons and daughters of the Father at one-ment and stillness, and we're in flow with the spirit of the world. By properly uttered invocations, mantras like Om, 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 they're here referred to in the significant phrase, inaudible mutterings. The higher powers in nature, ordinarily unseen by humans, are caused to reveal themselves to the sight of the yogi. I call it Yogi Mind in my astrology book. Astrological aspects of the art, I call it Yogi Mind. This mind that awakens with eternity and at one-ment. and can dance in awe movement and be still here now. Got it? That's my take. Okay. The inutterable mutterings. There's another talk I do from the Bhagavad Gita on Om. You might want to look at that for one of the inaudible mutterings. Om, 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 om. The higher powers in nature, ordinarily unseen by humans, are caused to reveal themselves in the sight of the yogi. And inasmuch as all the powers in nature cannot be evoked at once, the mind must be directed to some particular force or power in nature. Hence the use of the term with one's favorite deity. Or virtue, right? The gods are virtues. Okay. Perfection in meditation comes from persevering devotion to the Supreme Soul. A posture assumed by a yogi must be steady and pleasant. For the clearing up of the mind of the student, it is to be observed that the postures laid down in variant systems of yoga are not absolutely essential to the successful pursuit of the practice of concentration and attainment of its ultimate fruits of yoga. All such postures, as prescribed by Hindu writers, are based upon an accurate knowledge of the physiological effects produced by them, which I previously mentioned somewhere about light on yoga. Iyengar goes into all the postures and how it produces health. But the real Patanjali Yoga Aphorisms book is trying to get into all the postures that produce states of consciousness, of happiness and enlightenment and emancipation and moksha and freedom, liberation, right? Happiness. But the present day, these postures are only possible for Hindus on the physical level who from their earliest years are accustomed to assuming them. So these are postures of the mind. Take that, you anthroposophists who think yoga is bad. It's not just yoga, it's not hatha yoga. It's like the Raja yoga, the Yana, wisdom yoga, Sophia yoga. And the yogi mind, I think, sits and holds the tension of opposites of God and all God's creation, stillness and movement, love and truth. When command over the postures has been thoroughly attained, the effort to assume them is easy. And when the mind has become thoroughly identified with the boundlessness of space, the posture becomes steady and pleasant. Let's read that again. When command over the postures has been thoroughly attained, the effort to assume them is easy. And when the mind has become thoroughly identified with the boundlessness of space, the posture becomes steady and pleasing. When this condition has been attained, the yogi feels no assaults from the pairs of opposites. Here the pairs of opposites reference is made to the conjoined classification all through the Hindu philosophical and metaphysical systems of the opposite qualities, conditions, and states of being, which are eternal sources of pleasure or pain in mundane existence, such as cold and heat, hunger and satiety, day and night, poverty and riches, liberty and despotism. Yeah, you have to get to higher states of consciousness for the chess pieces to move across the checkerboard square. The checkerboard square in both masonry and chess are spirit and matter. We have to transcend spirit and matter with this consciousness. Between spirit and matter, or the Father, and the world soul is the mind, the only begotten son, daughter. This is a big theme I have in all my talks. And in my metaphysical astrology book called Astrological Aspects, the Art, both for prediction and metaphysics. Okay, let's continue reading. We're getting there. Patanjali's Yoga Aphorisms. Also, when this condition has been attained, there should succeed regulation of the breath in exhalation, inhalation, and retention. Now here they're telling you, let all your breath out, exhalation. Then strong inhalation of the whole world. You inhale it and empty it in your heart. And this retention for a second, as you breathe it in, I'm adding to this, that you breathe in, wishing for enlightenment. Let all your breath out, letting go of all your separate self and your hang-ups and your doubts And then you breathe in the spirit of the world, the original intention of the world, with you in it. And then you hold it for a minute, wishing you had enlightenment, and then you bless the world when you let go. Okay, here's what they say then. This regulate, after they say exhalation, inhalation, retention. This regulation of the breath, which is in exhalation, inhalation, and retention, is further restricted by conditions of time, place, and number, each of which may be long or short. There is a special variety of breath regulation which has reference to both that described in the last preceding aphorism and the inner sphere of breathing. They mention here, these last few aphorisms allude to the regulation of the breath as a portion of the physical exercises referred to in the note on 46. Transcending opposites. Acquaintance with the rules and prescriptions for which, on the part of the student, is inferred by Patanjali. Aphorism 50 refers merely to the regulation of the several periods, degrees of forces, and number of alternating recurrences of the three divisions of breathing: exhalation, inhalation, and retention of the breath. Now, it's interesting. Okay, let me finish. I'll tell you that. But Aphorism 51 alludes to another regulation of the breath, which is its governance by the mind so as to control its direction to and consequent influence upon the certain centers of nerve perception within the human body for the production of physiological followed by psychical effects. I think it's interesting that Rudolf Steiner points out in certain exercises, if I were to understand him correctly, which anybody who studies Rudolf Steiner knows you should have a healthy doubt about. But Blavatsky, Steiner, Hermetics, Neoplatonism, Manly Hall, these are deep subjects that go with this book. The Bhagavad Gita, in this particular one we're on now, book 2 of the Yoga Aphorisms of Patanjali. Steiner talks about when you let your breath out, you take a breath in and ponder, you empty Steiner in one place says you empty the content of your perception into your heart. And I've kind of added on to this a little bit. You breathe in and you empty, and then when you breathe out, you hold it out for just a little bit. This is a more advanced stage that Steiner brings up. And when you're holding it out, it's really like, that's what you're going to do when you die. And we're going to be a spiritual being that's outside of our body. And just between you and me, the trinity of thinking, feeling, willing, it's really the light, the breath, and the warmth. You might have to think about that. I don't want to say any more right now about that for a lot of reasons, and one of the main ones is we're right at the end here. So let's finish. By means of this regulation, remember inhalation, exhalation, inhalation, retention. I like that idea because a lot of people have trouble taking a breath in because they're holding their breath already. They had difficult experiences when they're younger and they're always holding their breath and blocking life from teaching them. Steiner's big thing is to look at what's going on in the world and to try to use spiritual knowledge to understand it. I think that's a good idea. Okay, so let's keep reading. By means of this regulation of the breath, the obscuration of the mind resulting from the influence of the body is removed. They're saying it frees your mind a little bit. And thus the mind becomes prepared for acts of attention. Restraint is the accommodation of the senses of the nature of the mind. Restraint is the accommodation of the senses to the nature of the mind, with an absence on the part of the senses of their sensibility to direct impression from objects. I think that means sense-free thinking, like Steiner talks about. Therefore results a complete subjugation of the senses. The senses become like this one sense of breath and mind and light. So this ends book 2 of the Yoga Aphorisms. And then we will, if fate and destiny have it, we will continue we'll do book 1 and book 3 another time. Book 3 starts with fixing the mind on a place or object or subject is attention, and dharana and dhyana. the continuance of this attention is contemplation, which is called dhyana. This contemplation, when it is practiced only in respect to a material subject or object of sense, is meditation called samadhi. When this fixedness of attention, contemplation, and meditation are practiced with respect to one object, they together constitute what is called sannyama, corresponding like this restraint. I wanted to read that beginning because I think I've got this idea hooked in my head from some insight I had, that dhyana, the Dayan koans, I mean, this has to do with Dionysius. Dionysius was, for thousands of years, maybe 3,000, 5,000, 7,000 years, maybe, was what we would call Jesus or Christ or the Messiah or Mithras or Hermes. It was, it was Dionysius and Diana of Ephesus. Take that. Aha. Artemis of Ephesus, Diana. Fixing the mind on a place, object, or subject is attention. This mind stream continuum, the continuance of this attention, is contemplation, which is Dionysius. This contemplation, when it's practiced only in respect to a material subject or object of sense, is meditation. It's called samadhi. Okay, so that brings us into part 4, which we're not going to get to right now, but I want to. That's part 3 actually, and then there's a part 4. It's very interesting that Patanjali's Yoga Aphorisms are in 4 sections, because I think this relates to the physical, etheric, astral, and the ego, and we just went through part 2, which would be more the etheric understanding. And then we're going to the astral, and the ego is the essential nature of isolation, or I, soul. I, soul, is sun. A, the beginning, where they talk about perfections of body or superhuman powers. Perfections of body or superhuman powers are produced by birth or by powerful incantations, mantras, sacrifices, meditations, herbs. It's very interesting. And we're going to go to that, part 4. The essential nature of their enlightenment, of becoming attuned to Ishvara, and to the word Om, which is our own higher self. All Buddhas and teachers and spiritual friends and these spiritual books, they're all like mirrors of our own higher self, that eventually we have to get it. There's the ultimate is that you get it. The relative is that it exists. It does exist with or without you. And, you end up in the reabsorption of these wonderful virtuous qualities which consummate the aim of the soul, this abiding of the soul, calm abiding, awakened space, equanimity, virtues, the soul united with understanding in its own nature is this superior spiritual isolation or emancipation, which you can find in any place or space or object that doesn't delay the soul but awakens the inner self. All experiences should awaken us to our highest creative potential to enjoy the opposites and dance between the pleasure and pain, good and evil, hot and cold, or to transcend it, or to be the lightning bolt, lightning rod, touching the highest heaven and reaching into the deepest hell realms to bring together a new heaven and earth and a new sense of, ever-renewed sense of self and creative, spiritual, virtuous fun. And isolation isn't this cold thing that it sounds like. It's I think it's like the finding of the sun in the eye, and it's consolation prize is just knowing about it, but it can be experienced directly. And that is the goal we're after. Om, 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 om. May all beings find happiness and the causes of happiness. Om, 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 om. May we be friends. Until the world's enlightened, may we be friends. And I hope you enjoyed Patanjali's Yoga Aphorisms, the interpretation by William Q. Judge. And this whole book has been dedicated and laid upon the heart's altar, and Blavatsky is a whole big part of this. And the Theosophical Society, which is the Theosophia is the wisdom of deity or God. Anthroposophia is the wisdom of the human. So all these things can work together, and I'm looking forward to us working together again. If you have any questions or spiritual scriptures or books teachings you'd like me to help try to explain for you, let me know. Ask your questions. This is Robert Thibodeau, Mayflower Bookshop in Berkley, Michigan, mayflowerbookshop.com, and you can find me on YouTube. I just posted a new song, Love Will Never Ever Die. Bless your heart.